Between 1545 and 1650, Spain hauled home the greatest fortune the world had ever seen, and somehow finished that same stretch bankrupt 6 separate times. Finding a literal mountain made of silver sounds like winning history's lottery. And that is exactly how Spain treated it, which turned out to be the entire problem. In 1545, prospectors high in the Andes struck Cerro Rico at Potosi, a single mountain so absurdly rich it would soon supply most of the silver on Earth. At its peak, that one mountain produced around 60% of all the silver in the world, hauled down its slopes in mule trains that simply never stopped coming. Every year, treasure fleets docked at Seville, stuffed with bullion, and soon 1 out of every 5 ducats in the king's entire revenue came straight from the Americas. Spain immediately found ways to spend it, fighting the Dutch, the French, the Ottomans, and occasionally the English, often several of them at the very same time. Better yet, the crown learned to spend silver that hadn't even arrived, borrowing against future fleets, which works beautifully right up until one storm sinks your entire budget. Most of the silver never even stayed in Spain. It landed in Seville and slid straight onward to Genoese and German bankers repaying loans the crown had already spent. Meanwhile, something strange crept through Spanish markets. Ever more coins were chasing the same amount of bread, and every single year everything quietly cost a little more. Historians call it the price revolution. Castilian prices climbed more than 50% in a single generation and kept climbing for a century, history's first great inflation. With prices soaring at home, it became cheaper to import nearly everything, so Spanish workshops withered while foreign goods sailed in and Spanish silver sailed right out. Plenty of the treasure kept sailing all the way onward to Asia for silk and porcelain. Spain wasn't a destination for its own fortune, just a very expensive corridor. In 1557, King Philip II simply stopped payments entirely, becoming the first serial defaulter in world history, a title he would go on to defend repeatedly. He defaulted again in 1560, 1575 and 1596, and each time the bankers sighed, restructured the debt, and lent again at even juicier rates. The 1575 default froze Spain's credit lines completely, which meant the enormous Spanish army stationed up in Flanders suddenly stopped receiving its wages altogether. In 1576, those unpaid soldiers mutinied and sacked the rich city of Antwerp, trashing Europe's financial capital over a payroll problem, all that silver was supposed to prevent. Then came 1588 and the Great Armada against England, financed largely on borrowed money, which proceeded to sink into the sea along with the entire repayment plan. Here's the maddening part. The 1590s brought more American silver to Spain than any decade before, and the crown finished those years poorer and deeper in debt than ever. For ordinary Spaniards, wages crawled while bread sprinted. A labourer's pay bought less every single year, even as legendary treasure kept parading past the harbour into other pockets. Fields emptied as farming stopped paying, and working for a living quietly became something respectable Spaniards avoided, which is a truly fascinating strategy for a national economy. Potosi itself, meanwhile, boomed into one of the largest cities on the planet, high in the freezing Andes, briefly holding more people than London or even Paris. Spaniards even coined the expression worth a Potosí to mean absolutely priceless, while back home the only thing actually getting cheaper in Spain was, ironically, silver itself. When the mountain's output finally thinned in the 1600s, the spending habits stayed exactly the same, and the crown defaulted again in 1607, 27 and 47. By the 1650s, Spain was a fading power with magnificent titles, a hollow treasury, and a royal court still dressing like the richest empire on the planet. Meanwhile, the Dutch and the English, who owned precisely 0 silver mountains between them, built trade industry and banking, and rose exactly as mineral-rich Spain sank. Here's the twist Spain never saw coming. Silver was never wealth. It was only money, and real wealth is what an economy can actually grow, build, and make. Economists today call this the resource curse, the pattern where free riches quietly smother everything else an economy does. And imperial Spain is patient zero in the textbook. Real winners of the century were the merchants and bankers of Genoa, Amsterdam, and London, who sold Spain its goods, financed its wars, and quietly kept the silver. Line up the whole disaster: 6 bankruptcies, runaway prices, vanished industry, mutinous armies, and every single thread leads back to mistaking a pile of metal for prosperity. So Spain owned the mountain, but the world got the silver. History's greatest treasure passed through the empire like water through a sieve, leaving nothing behind but the receipts.